Locked in an old wooden stall at an animal rescue station in Florida, the tall black horse lay motionless, its dull eyes reflecting defeat and despair. The stall, built from weathered planks, had narrow gaps where faint sunset light seeped through. The air was filled with the smell of dry hay, dust, and lingering moisture from the previous night's heavy rain, creating a somber atmosphere. Eclipse, the name given by the rescue staff, was curled up on the muddy ground, its once sleek black coat now ragged and matted with dirt. Its large frame blended into the darkness of the stall, with only its sorrowful eyes catching the last weak rays of sunlight. This rescue station was a haven for abandoned, abused, or deemed worthless animals. Other horse stalls were livelier, with the sounds of whinnies, hooves hitting the dirt floor, and horses sticking their heads out, eagerly awaiting their evening meals. But Eclipse's stall was silent, as though time had forgotten it. Eclipse no longer had the strength to whinny or vie for attention. It no longer hoped for a gentle touch or a promise of a better future. Its glazed-over eyes reflected resignation, a horse accustomed to indifference and neglect, awaiting its days to pass as endless as the night. Once, Eclipse had been a strong and proud horse. Its muscular build and sturdy legs had carried it across vast fields. But now, all of that was a distant memory. Eclipse did not whinny or kick like the other horses. It lay still, its ears drooping, as if every ounce of survival instinct had been drained. The scars on its body told untold stories of whippings, exhausting labor, and lonely days. Yet no one at the rescue cared enough to ask or understand. To them, Eclipse was just an old, worthless horse. When visitors came to the station, their eyes would merely skim over Eclipse. Younger, glossy-coated, vibrant horses always caught their attention. Even Eclipse's sorrowful, deep gaze could not hold anyone's focus for more than a few seconds. "That's a difficult one," they whispered among themselves. "No one wants to adopt a horse like that." Eclipse had become a faint shadow at the rescue station, waiting for an inevitable end. That evening, as the pale golden light of the sunset faded, darkness and quietness took over. The lights in the station were turned off one by one, leaving the space illuminated only by moonlight filtering through the trees outside. Eclipse lay in the corner of its stall, eyes half closed. Outside, the wind whistled softly through the wooden slats, carrying the scent of damp grass and cold earth. The rain had stopped, but the air remained heavy, as if forewarning something grim. Eclipse was unaware that the next day would be its last. The station had decided there was no room left, and Eclipse was deemed unfit for further care. Elsewhere in town, Isabel, a veterinarian, was sitting in her small apartment. Her room was modest, with an old sofa, a cluttered desk filled with books, and a window overlooking the peaceful night of the small town. Isabel scrolled through her phone, the screen's glow reflecting on her tired face. Her busy work schedule had delayed her plans to adopt an animal several times. But that night, when she stumbled upon a post from the rescue station, she paused. A blurry photo of Eclipse appeared, a jet-black horse with weary eyes, its gaze seeming to pierce the viewer's soul. The brief caption read, "Eclipse, 15 years old, needs a home by tomorrow, or it will face euthanasia." There was something in Eclipse's eyes that Isabel couldn't ignore. It wasn't just sadness, but also a silent plea for help. Isabel hesitated for a few seconds before picking up her phone and calling the station. No one answered, but she left a message. "Hi, this is Isabel. I want to help Eclipse. Please don't do anything until I arrive tomorrow morning." After hanging up, Isabel leaned back on her chair, gripping her phone tightly. Outside the window, moonlight illuminated the still scenery. A strange wave of emotion surged in her chest. Worry, fear, but also determination. She set her alarm for an early morning, knowing she had to act the next day. At the rescue station, Eclipse remained still in its stall. Moonlight slipped through the gaps in the wooden walls, highlighting its rough coat. A cold breeze swept through, rustling a few dry leaves outside, But Eclipse paid no attention. It had grown used to cold and lonely nights, yet deep down, a faint glimmer of hope stirred, as if it sensed its story was not yet over. The following morning, the sun began to rise over the horizon, painting the sky with soft shades of orange and pink. The station gradually came to life. Younger horses whinnied loudly, urging the staff to bring breakfast. Rose, the station manager, walked slowly past each stall, checking on the horses. When she stopped at Eclipse's stall, she hesitated briefly. The folder in her hand felt heavy, much like the decision she was about to make. "I'm sorry, boy," Rose murmured, her eyes filled with regret. "We tried, but no one came for you." Eclipse didn't move or make a sound. It had accepted its fate. Meanwhile, Isabel was on her way to the rescue station. Her small car rolled slowly through the quiet streets, with only the yellow glow of streetlights reflecting on the wet road from last night's rain. The air inside the car felt stifling, and though it was morning, gray clouds still covered the sky. Her heart pounded, her mind racing with questions. What if he's too difficult to handle? What if I'm not capable of caring for him? Each time a negative thought surfaced, she recalled the image of Eclipse's sorrowful eyes from the rescue post, an image that pricked at her heart, urging her not to turn back. When Isabel pulled into the rescue station's parking lot, she paused, taking a deep breath. In front of her stood a simple brick building with peeling paint, exposing dull gray patches underneath. Around the station was a tall, rusted chain-link fence, with sparse bushes growing between the posts. The air carried the faint smell of damp earth mixed with hay. Isabel tightened her grip on the steering wheel, glancing at her phone where the post about Eclipse remained open. "I can do this," she whispered, stepping out of the car. She hurried toward the entrance, her shoes echoing against the concrete walkway. Inside, the space was open but cold. Fluorescent lights on the ceiling cast a stark glow on the clean but barren cement floor. The whinnies of horses echoed down the hall, interspersed with the rhythmic hum of an old fan. At the end of the hallway, Rose, the station manager, was hunched over a wooden desk, reviewing Eclipse's file one last time. Hearing the door open, she looked up. Standing before her was a young woman, her breath quick and her face etched with tension. "Hello, I'm Isabel," the woman said, her voice trembling. "I called last night about Eclipse." Rose glanced at the clock on the wall, the hour hand moving sluggishly as if to stretch out time. "You're early," she said, then hesitated. "But also late. We had scheduled to—" Isabel interrupted her. "I'm here to take him," she said firmly, her voice resolute, though her eyes betrayed unease. Rose stared at Isabel, assessing her. "Are you sure? Eclipse isn't an easy horse. He's had a rough past and we've faced issues with stubbornness, even aggression." "I'm sure," Isabel replied, her voice growing steadier. "I know what I'm doing. Please give me a chance." Rose sighed softly, then rose to her feet. There was something in Isabel's gaze that made her reconsider. "All right," she said, placing a file on the table. "I'll take you to meet him." Isabel followed Rose down a long hallway, the echoes of their steps growing livelier. The air was thick with the scent of disinfectant, mingled with damp straw and a faint hint of horse. Light filtered through small high windows, casting dancing patterns on the floor. When they reached Eclipse's stall, Isabel stopped, her chest tightening. Eclipse lay curled in a corner of the stall, his head resting on his slender legs, his eyes dull and unresponsive. His black coat was lackluster, revealing faint scars. The stall was clean, yet it couldn't dispel the gloom he carried. Rose opened the stall gate slowly and carefully. "Be cautious," she advised, her tone neither encouraging nor discouraging. Isabel knelt, gripping the edge of the stall for balance. "Hey, Eclipse," she whispered gently. "It's all right, boy. I'm here to take you home." Eclipse's ears twitched at the sound of her voice. He slowly raised his head, his gaze a mix of curiosity and wariness. Isabel didn't rush closer. She extended her hand, maintaining a distance to avoid overwhelming him. "It's okay," she continued, her voice patient. Eclipse hesitated, his body tense as if ready to bolt. But after a long moment, he took a small step forward. His nostrils flared slightly as he sniffed the air, his head lowering cautiously to assess the stranger before him. Isabel held her breath, keeping her hand steady, unmoving. When Eclipse lightly touched his nose to her palm, she exhaled in relief, a faint smile tugging at her lips. Rose watched from the corner of the stall, her expression softening. "There's a lot of work ahead, but maybe you'll be all right," she remarked. The next morning, Isabel led Eclipse out of his stall. Morning sunlight streamed through the overhang, enveloping them in a warm glow. Eclipse walked slowly, his hesitant steps brushing against the grass-covered ground. The world around them came alive with birdsong and a gentle breeze. Eclipse remained wary, but he didn't resist. For the first time in months, he left the familiar confines of his shelter. When they reached Isabel's home, she guided Eclipse to a small stable behind her house that she had prepared. The stall was lined with fresh straw, clean and inviting. A bucket of clear water stood beside a trough filled with fresh hay. Eclipse hesitated before stepping inside, his nose exploring every corner as if to inspect his new surroundings. After a while, he stopped in a corner and turned to look at Isabel, his eyes less guarded. "It's all right, Eclipse," Isabel said softly. "This is your home now." Eclipse lowered his head as if understanding her words. Isabel smiled, a sense of relief washing over her. This was just the beginning, but she believed that with love and patience, they could overcome anything. In the days that followed, Isabel focused on building trust with Eclipse. In the quiet space of the stable, sunlight filtered through the cracks in the wood. Isabel never forced him to interact. She chose to sit quietly on a wooden chair, sometimes reading, sometimes working on her old laptop, allowing Eclipse to grow accustomed to her presence. The air in the stable carried the subtle scent of hay and wood, creating a peaceful atmosphere that even Isabel found soothing. Gradually, Eclipse began to change. His once rigid posture softened, and the wary depths of his brown eyes grew less guarded. One day, as Isabel was reading an old book on animal training, she felt a gentle movement beside her. Eclipse had approached, lowering his head, his warm breath brushing against her shoulder. Isabel froze, not wanting to startle him, and waited. After a few seconds, Eclipse retreated hesitantly, but Isabel recognized the moment as a significant step forward. "Good boy, Eclipse," she whispered, her voice warm with encouragement. Days turned into weeks, marked by small but precious changes. Eclipse no longer avoided her approach. Sometimes he even stepped toward her on his own, his sleek black mane swaying gently in the golden morning sunlight. Isabel exercised patience, never rushing him. She knew that for a horse as scarred as Eclipse to open up, time was essential. One quiet evening, as Isabel lounged on the sofa in her living room, the warm glow of a lamp illuminating the room, she felt a gentle weight on her leg. Looking down, her breath caught. Eclipse, the large horse she had only recently brought into her life, stood beside her, lightly lowering his head to her knee. Isabel held her breath, afraid that any sudden movement might startle him. Slowly, she reached out, her hand hovering just above his head before lightly touching his soft coat. "Good boy, Eclipse," she murmured, her voice trembling with emotion. Eclipse stood still, his gaze calm, no longer avoiding her as he once had. After a while, he quietly returned to his corner of the stable, but for Isabel, the moment felt like a monumental breakthrough. That night, as she lay in bed listening to the gentle patter of rain against the window, she thought about all Eclipse had endured. The faint scars on his body and the once guarded look in his eyes told a story of pain and survival. But beneath it all, Isabel saw a glimmer of hope. She vowed never to give up, no matter how challenging the journey. In the weeks that followed, Eclipse's progress became more evident, though it remained slow. At first, it was the small flick of his mane when she called his name or the way he followed her from a distance, keeping her in sight but not too close. Morning light often bathed the stable in golden hues, highlighting the sleek sheen of Eclipse's coat as he observed Isabel with growing curiosity. One day, Isabel brought a new soft cushion and carefully spread it on the floor of the stable. Eclipse stopped, looking at her with a wary gaze. She stepped back and sat nearby, leaving the choice to him. Finally, after several minutes of hesitation, Eclipse moved closer, lowered his head to sniff the cushion, and slowly lay down. Isabel could hardly hold back her tears. It was a clear sign that he was beginning to feel safe in his new home. One evening, Isabel decided to try something new. Holding the halter, she approached Eclipse and spoke softly. "Eclipse, would you like to go for a walk?" Eclipse tilted his head, his ears twitching, his expression curious but still cautious. Isabel waited, not forcing him, and after a moment, he allowed her to slip the halter on. When she opened the stable door, Eclipse hesitated, standing still, his large brown eyes searching hers for reassurance. Isabel gently stroked his mane. "It's okay, come on, let's go." Eclipse stepped outside, the cool night breeze ruffling his sleek black coat. The outdoor air carried the scent of grass and earth after the rain, accompanied by the chirping of insects in the darkness. At first, Eclipse's steps were slow and cautious, but gradually he began to relax, his nostrils flaring as he breathed in the fresh air. Isabel smiled, feeling a deep joy at seeing him enjoy the moment. As they passed a street corner, a neighbor appeared, leading a reddish-brown pony. Isabel tensed, unsure how Eclipse would react. "It's okay, Eclipse," she whispered, her voice calm. The neighbor stopped at a distance, raising a hand for Eclipse to sniff. Eclipse froze, the tension in the lead rope making Isabel alert. But instead of reacting negatively, Eclipse merely stepped back a few paces, his eyes wary but no longer filled with excessive fear. "Good boy, Eclipse," Isabel encouraged, her voice filled with pride. On the way back home, Eclipse's steps grew more confident, his ears relaxed, and his head held higher. When they reached the stable, the silver moonlight glinted off Eclipse's shiny coat, and Isabel felt a shift in him. That night, as she sat in her chair with a cup of tea, she sensed Eclipse's presence. He approached her, lowering his head gently onto her lap. Isabel smiled, her fingers softly running through his silky fur. "Good boy, Eclipse," she whispered, her heart brimming with hope. It was a moment where she knew they had taken a big step forward in building trust and healing. But just when everything seemed to be settling into place, a shadow from Eclipse's past emerged. One night, as Isabel was tidying up her small kitchen, she noticed a strange car parked across the street. Under the dim glow of the street lamp, the car stood like a ghost, its headlights long extinguished. Time passed, yet the car didn't move. Isabel tried to convince herself it could be a neighbor's visitor, but unease crept into her heart, heavy like the damp night air. Eclipse, the horse she had rescued from a vague and troubled past, sensed something unusual. He stood in the stable near the largest window, his sharp ears erect like two antennae. His large frame was tense, his bright eyes glinting in the faint light. Each time a cold gust of wind swept through, Eclipse exhaled deeply, a low, resonant sound echoing through the stable, a silent but powerful warning. Isabel couldn't ignore him. Her heart sank, a nameless worry taking hold. She walked over, placing her hand on Eclipse's mane, the silky hair trembling slightly. "It's okay, buddy," she whispered, trying to calm both of them. She stroked his thick mane gently, but Eclipse's gaze remained fixed on the car, his hoof scraping lightly against the straw-covered ground. Something deeper, more primal, kept him on edge. Dry leaves rustled along the nearby path as the night wind passed through, carrying the earthy scent of wet ground and the chill of the air. The surroundings were peaceful, but the silence carried a menacing weight, as if everything was holding its breath, waiting for something to happen. She glanced at the clock on the wall, the hands pointed past midnight. Unable to bear the unease, Isabel decided to step outside and check. The faint moonlight filtered through thick clouds, illuminating the small garden in front of her. The cold air pierced through her thin jacket, sending a shiver down her spine. She approached the edge of the road where the car remained stationary. Its dark-tinted windows prevented her from seeing inside. "Can I help you with something?" Isabel called out, her voice steady, though a storm raged within her. Her words dissolved into the stillness, with no response. Moments later, the car's engine roared to life, shattering the night's silence. The headlights blazed on suddenly, blindingly bright, and before she could react, the car sped off, leaving a trail of taillight glow fading into the darkness. Isabel stood frozen, her heart pounding as if it might burst from her chest. She returned to the house, where Eclipse stood close to the stable door. He hadn't taken his eyes off the road, his ears still alert and his body taut. He let out a small whinny, as if to tell her the danger wasn't gone yet. Isabel gently placed a hand on his neck, feeling the warmth of his large body as a source of comfort. The next morning, sunlight streamed through the windows, but it couldn't lift the heavy feeling in Isabel's heart. She decided to call the rescue center where she had adopted Eclipse, hoping to uncover more about his past. A soft, low voice answered on the other end, but the response left Isabel disappointed. "We don't have much information," the manager apologized. "All we know is that he was found on an abandoned farm. There were rumors that the place was once used for illegal horse racing." Isabel's chest tightened painfully upon hearing those words. She imagined Eclipse confined in a harsh environment, a place devoid of compassion. It explained the sensitivity and occasional fear in his eyes. That evening, Isabel meticulously checked every window and locked all the doors. Eclipse stayed by her side, his deep black eyes seeming to protect her from whatever might come. Outside, the wind began to howl, bringing heavy rain that lashed against the windows. Around midnight, Eclipse suddenly sprang to his feet, his piercing black eyes fixed on the gate. The sound of an engine echoed through the rain, tearing through the stormy night. The car had returned. Isabel's hands trembled as she dialed the police. "This is Isabel Rolling. That car is back," she said quickly, her voice quivering with anxiety. The dispatcher assured her that a unit would be sent immediately, but she knew the wait would feel like an eternity. Eclipse stood close to the door, his keen ears catching every sound. He let out a sharp whinny, his body poised like a warrior ready to defend his territory. Outside, heavy and ominous footsteps broke through the steady rhythm of the rain. Isabel held her breath, her eyes fixed on the door. The door rattled as though someone was trying to force it open. Isabel's heart pounded, but before she could react, Eclipse charged forward, striking the door with his powerful hoof, creating a deafening noise. The man outside startled and stepped back. Isabel shouted, "The police are on their way. Leave now." The man cursed under his breath, but eventually retreated. The car sped off into the night, leaving an empty road and faint traces on the rain-soaked ground. When the police arrived, Isabel recounted everything, her hands still shaking. They promised to patrol the area more often, but Isabel knew the ordeal wasn't truly over. The next morning, she received a call from the rescue center. "Someone inquired about Eclipse this morning," the manager said, her tone cautious. They didn't leave a name but seemed very intent on knowing his whereabouts. A chill ran down Isabel's spine. Unable to wait any longer, Isabel decided to leave the house. She packed her belongings, led Eclipse out of his stable, and hitched him to a trailer. The peaceful countryside roads, lined with endless green fields, stretched before them. When they arrived at a small house in a rural area, Isabel felt a wave of relief wash over her. Eclipse inhaled the fresh air, his large frame seeming to shed every burden. For the first time his eyes sparkled, reflecting a newfound tranquility. Isabel smiled, tears streaming down her cheeks. "From now on you're my family," she said, wrapping her arms around his neck. Eclipse let out a soft whinny, as if expressing gratitude from the depths of his heart. If this story has touched your heart, please help spread its meaningful message by sharing it with those around you. Don't forget to click like and subscribe to our channel to support more inspiring stories like this. Together we can give animals like Eclipse a chance to rewrite their lives, to live in love, freedom, and peace as they truly deserve. Thank you for joining us on this journey. Let's continue to plant seeds of hope, one story and one heart at a time.